You think you know a person until a secret they've held for 50 years changes everything you thought was true. It's a lesson I learned not from a spy novel or a late-night movie, but from a woman of God, a nun named Sister Agnes. And if you've ever looked back on your life and wondered about the path not taken, you'll understand the weight of the story I'm about to share. So settle in, and if this tale resonates with you, we'd be honored if you'd like and subscribe for more stories that journey into the heart. Sister Agnes was a fixture in our small town, a gentle presence in her crisp black and white habit, her face a roadmap of gentle lines etched by a lifetime of quiet service. She taught generations of children, my own grandchildren included, their catechism. She was kindness itself, but there was always a whisper of something else behind her pale blue eyes. A distant sadness, a melancholy that seemed to cling to her like faint incense. We all just assumed it was the weight of a life devoted to prayer and sacrifice. We were wrong. The truth began to surface on a Tuesday. I was helping her sort through old hymnals in the church basement, a dusty, sunbeam-lit room that smelled of old paper and wax. Her hands, frail and veined, paused over a crumbling cardboard box tucked away on a top shelf. She pulled it down with a soft grunt, sending a cloud of dust dancing in the light. Inside weren't more books, but memories. A small, leather-bound journal, its cover soft with age, and a single, sepia-toned photograph. She went very still, her breath catching in her throat. Her finger, trembling slightly, traced the edge of that photograph. I saw her eyes well up, a single tear tracing a path through the fine dust on her cheek. "Some doors," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "are meant to stay closed." But this one was about to be blown wide open. She didn't speak for a long moment, just held that picture as if it were the most sacred relic in the entire church. And then she turned to me, her gaze clear and startlingly direct. "I wasn't always a nun, you know," she said. The statement hung in the dusty air, simple and utterly devastating. It was the first thread pulled from a tapestry she had spent a lifetime weaving. Of course, she was always a nun. That was her identity. It was like saying the river didn't always flow to the sea. It made no sense. She saw the confusion on my face and gave a small, sad smile. Before I took my vows, my name was Eleanor, and I was deeply, hopelessly in love. The world seemed to tilt. Sister Agnes, in love? The idea was as foreign as snow in July. She gestured for me to sit on an old wooden pew stored against the wall. The sunbeam warmed our backs as she began to speak, her voice taking on a new, younger timbre, shedding the years like a worn-out coat. "It was 1958, she began. I was 19 years old. My world was all bobby socks, poodle skirts, and the sound of Buddy Holly on the jukebox down at the malt shop. She painted a picture of a vibrant, post-war America, a time of innocence and burgeoning hope. She described a young Eleanor, full of dreams not of the cloister, but of a white picket fence. She was to be married. His name was Michael. Michael had a smile that could disarm a thunderstorm, she said, a ghost of that young girl's joy flickering across her aged face. He was going to be an engineer. He had plans. We had plans. We were going to build a life, have a family, grow old on a porch swing watching the sun set. She described their secret spot by the old creek. The way he'd bring her a single daisy every time they met, the sound of his laugh. It was a love story, pure and simple, and it was heading for a happy ending. Until the letter came. It was a draft notice, Sister Agnes said, her voice tightening. Korea, his number was called. The vibrant colors of her memory drained away, replaced by the stark, anxious gray of a nation sending its boys to war. There was a hurried, desperate goodbye at the train station. The smell of steam and cold dust. The promise they made to each other. He took my face in his hands, she whispered, her own hands mimicking the gesture in the air. He said, "You wait for me, Ellie. You be right here when I get home. I'm going to marry you the minute my boots hit this platform." I promised him I would. I promised with my whole heart. For months, letters were her lifeline. She'd read them by the window, tracing the words he'd written from a world away, a world of mud and fear she could scarcely imagine. His letters were hopeful at first, then grew shorter, more distant, filled with a fatigue that bled through the ink. And then they stopped. The silence was deafening. Weeks turned into a month. Then 2. The notification came on a bright, sunny day, she said, her voice now flat, devoid of all emotion, which was more heartbreaking than any tears could be. A telegram. The Department of the Army regrets to inform you, missing in action, presumed lost. She described the world dissolving around her. The hope that curdled into a desperate, aching grief. The future they had painted together, the porch swing, the children, it all vanished into a void. I felt extinguished, she confessed. The light he brought into my life was gone, and I was left in a darkness I didn't know how to navigate. She wandered through her days like a ghost. The malt shop music sounded like a dirge. The laughter of her friends felt like a personal affront. Her family tried to comfort her, but their words were empty echoes in the cavern of her loss. She was utterly, completely alone. I prayed for a sign, she said. For anything. For a reason to keep going. And then, I thought I found one. She found herself walking past the convent. She'd seen the nuns before, moving through their gardens with a serene purpose, their faces peaceful in a way hers would never be again. I thought their peace came from shutting out the world, she mused, from turning away from the pain of it. I thought if I couldn't have my life with Michael, then I would have no life at all. I would offer my emptiness to God. It was a decision born of profound despair, not divine calling. She applied to the order. Her family was shocked, begging her to wait, to grieve properly. But she was adamant. The world had taken her love. She would remove herself from the world. She entered the postulancy. The heavy convent door swung shut behind her with a finality that echoed in her soul. The first year was mechanical, she admitted. I went through the motions. The prayers, the chores, the silence. I wore the habit like a suit of armor, hoping it would eventually stop the hurt. But it didn't. The grief was just quieter, a constant, dull ache beneath the hymns and the rituals. She described the oppressive silence of the nights, where her memories of Michael were the loudest sound in her cell. She took her first vows. She became Sister Agnes. The lively, love-struck Eleanor was officially buried. But she carried a secret, a sin she felt she committed every single day. I was a fraud, she confessed, her voice thick with a shame 50 years old. The other sisters, they had a light in them, a true calling. I was just hiding. My faith wasn't born of love for God, but from a broken heart. And I believed, with every fiber of my being, that he knew it. This was the woman we all thought we knew, the pious, devoted nun. But her devotion was a monument to her loss. Her piety a mask for a pain she believed was a betrayal of the very vocation she had chosen. She lived with this secret guilt for decades, a silent penance for a love she could not forget and a calling she felt she had blasphemed. Then, the twist. The one that reframed everything. It happened 5 years after she entered the convent. The Mother Superior called her into her office. The air was serious. There was a man there, an army official, his hat in his hands. Sister Agnes's heart, which she thought had turned to stone, began to hammer against her ribs. "We have news, sister," the official said, his voice gentle. "About Michael. He wasn't dead. He had been captured. Wounded, but alive. He had spent years in a prisoner of war camp. He was part of a prisoner exchange that had just been negotiated. He was coming home. The world, which had narrowed to the 4 walls of her cell, suddenly exploded outwards. Michael was alive. The love of her life was coming home. The relief was so immense it was physically painful. It was immediately followed by a tidal wave of utter, soul-crushing terror. She was a nun. She had taken solemn vows. She had promised herself to God. The man she had promised herself to was alive, and she was bound to a life that suddenly felt like a prison of her own making. She was trapped. "I was given a choice," Sister Agnes said, her voice barely a whisper. I had to lean in to hear her. The Mother Superior was a kind woman, a wise woman. She knew my story. She knew why I had come to them. She told me the church had provisions for such extraordinary circumstances. My final vows were still a year away. The path was clear if I wished to take it. The vows I had taken were temporary. I could be released. I could leave. I could go to him. The hope was a terrifying, beautiful bird suddenly set free in her chest. She could have her life back. She could have Michael back. The porch swing, the future, the love that had never died. It was all being offered back to her. She spent that night in the chapel, on her knees, not in prayer, but in agony. It was the greatest conflict of her life. A choice between a sacred promise made in grief and a sacred promise made in love. "I thought of Michael," she said. "I thought of his smile. I thought of the life we dreamed of. I ached for it. I ached for him." But then, she thought of the convent. She thought of the silent peace she had eventually, genuinely found. The purpose that had slowly grown within her, not as a replacement for her love, but alongside it. She thought of the young children she taught, who saw her as a steady rock in their lives. She thought of the God she had initially run to for shelter, but had slowly learned to love for himself. The next morning, pale and hollow-eyed from her vigil, she went to the Mother Superior. Her decision was made. She would not seek release. She would not go back. She would take her final vows and remain Sister Agnes. It was the hardest decision she ever made. It was a decision that felt like tearing her own heart in two. She asked the Mother Superior one final thing. A letter. She wrote to Michael. She told him everything. That she had thought him dead. That she had entered the convent. That her love for him was, and would always be, the great love of her life. But that her path had changed. She had found a different kind of calling, a different kind of love. She released him from his promise, and she asked for his forgiveness. She begged him to live a full and happy life, to find love again, to have the family they had dreamed of. She told him she would pray for him every day for the rest of her life. She never received a reply. She never knew if he got the letter. She never knew if he was angry or hurt, or if he understood. That silence was her final, lifelong penance. She buried Eleanor for the second time, and Sister Agnes, the true Sister Agnes, was born from that sacrifice. She finished her story. The dust in the basement had settled. The sunbeam had moved across the floor. The weight of her revelation was immense. This woman, who we all saw as a symbol of serene devotion, had lived a life of profound, hidden heartbreak and unimaginable choice. Her faith wasn't a retreat from the world. It was a victory over a pain that would have shattered a lesser person. Her peace wasn't ignorance. It was hard-won. She looked at me, her eyes clear. "I have wondered every day for 55 years what life would have been like," she said. "I have wondered about his smile, his laugh. I have prayed that he found happiness. The choice I made, it wasn't about rejecting him. It was about accepting the person I had become in his absence. And that person was meant to be here." She opened the journal she had pulled from the box. On the first page, pressed and perfectly preserved, was a single, brittle, faded daisy, the last one he ever gave her. And on the facing page, in her young, looping handwriting, was a quote she had written the day she received his draft notice. "Love is not love which alters when it alteration finds." She had lived by those words. Her love for Michael never altered. It simply took a different form. A form of prayer, of memory, of a lifelong, silent dedication. She had not chosen God over Michael. She had chosen to honor the love she had for Michael by living a life of purpose rather than a life of despair. Her vocation was not a rejection of their love story. It was its unexpected, painful, and sacred final chapter. The woman I thought I knew. I never knew her at all. And yet, knowing her now, I knew her better than anyone. She wasn't just a nun. She was a monument to a love that time could not erase. A testament to the fact that our lives are not defined by the paths we are forced to take, but by the grace with which we walk them. Her greatest act of faith wasn't entering the convent. It was choosing to stay. So the next time you see someone and think you know their story, remember Sister Agnes. Remember that everyone is fighting a battle you know nothing about, loving someone you cannot see, living with choices that have shaped them in ways both visible and invisible. Her story is a reminder that love endures in forms we can never predict. And if this journey into a hidden heart has moved you, we invite you to like and subscribe, and perhaps share a story of your own. For we are all, each of us, libraries of untold tales. And sometimes, the most ordinary face holds the most extraordinary secret of all.